This is the Nancy Stevens Lifestyle Show here on the New Horizon Radio.
Welcome to the Nancy Stevens Lifestyle Show here on the New Horizon Radio. My guest today has taken me on the most extraordinary journey, a son's search for the truth about his father. Paul Bessel was born in 1952 and by 19 was commuting between London and New York as an investment broker in his father's companies. When Peter Bessel vanished, his life changed direction completely. He became a prominent music publisher working with Billy Ocean, Eurovision legend Tony Hiller and Barry Blue before finding successful companies in transport and road safety. Finding Dad is his first book, and what a book to debut with. Peter Bessel, Liberal MP, businessman, international man of mystery, and one of the key figures in the trial of the century. Devoted father and politician, or spy, conman, and liar. Paul has spent many years piecing together the truth from unseen family archives and national records on both sides of the Atlantic. A book I could not put down. Paul, welcome to the show. Growing up with Peter Bessel, what was it actually like growing up with a father like Peter? Because the glamour, the mystery, the gaps. I mean, what did you actually know and what was kept from you?
Oh, at the time, I knew nothing. We had a really happy family life. I was brought up in Cornwall. That's where he was a member of Parliament. He appeared to be extremely wealthy. Very successful. I went to boarding school, so a lot of the time I didn't see much of him, but he was a really good father. I have wonderful memories of my childhood.
And that definitely comes through in the book that, you know, you were a devoted father and son, and there was never any question throughout the book that he didn't love you and your sister.
That's for sure. Yeah, that's one of the things that made the book sort of quite painful to write, because it's easy to write a book that is a defence of somebody that you love. And so to sit down and say, right, open your mind and say, right, just accept what is coming in front of you. So that's what made it tough to write, yeah. And
explain the moment when sort of everything changed, when your father disappeared. I mean, and that how that shaped your life, because your life was never the same after that, was it?
Not at all, no. Well, it happened, briefly, it happened when I was working for him in New York. He had an office on Fifth Avenue, and one Wednesday, I can remember, he said to me, I'm going away at the weekend, I have on business, and what he said was secret work at the time, more about that later, but you may not hear from me over the weekend, and if you don't, there are some papers in the safe in the office, and go and open those to do with a deal that was being done at the time and sort them out on Monday. Didn't think anything of it, because that was normal of Dad. And then on the Sunday, I hadn't heard from him, went to the office, opened the papers, and it was, I'm gone. And from having everything in the world, suddenly literally having nothing at all. He left $200 to myself, to my sister, a few $100s to my mother, and an air ticket home. And that was it. So yes, my life changed dramatically, yes, somewhat.
I'm almost speechless, because one can't even comprehend that, you know, as I say, your life literally in that split second changed from the secure, you know, you always felt very loved, but you know, you were very, by your own admission, had a very comfortable, wealthy existence, which
totally
you took for granted, probably.
Yes. Oh, 100%, yes.
Which one does, I think, you know, and, you know, one lives one's life, and then something happens, and then, you know, it's no more, and then it's like, oh, okay, I did not see that coming, and you could never in a million years have foreseen what was going on behind the scenes, ever, could you?
No, I had literally no idea. In fact, we were completing a deal where I thought we were going to be made multi-millionaires within days, literally that. It was the moment of finding out. I didn't cry when I read the letters, because we read them with my mother there and my sister. They did. We thought he might have gone to take his life, but to me it was just surreal. I mean, you know, in those days people used to run away to South America, didn't they? Gangsters ran away to South America. Was my dad a gangster? What had happened? So I just sat there for an hour or so and thought to myself, No. It's really just too unbelievable. So
Sure, yeah, exactly. Surely not. And coming up, we're going to be talking, and we don't, this isn't what the book's all about, but we're going to be talking about the Thorpe affair and the trial of the century.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to be talking to Paul Bessel, who's written this extraordinary book, which I'm holding upside the right way around this time, Finding Dad. So I wanted to talk about the Thorpe affair because I think a lot of people, sort of 55 plus, have heard of Jeremy Thorpe and kind of the trial of the century. So Jeremy Thorpe was a Liberal Party leader and one of the most sensational trials. He was part of the most sensational trials in British legal history. And your dad sort of sat at the heart of it all as a key witness against his closest friend. Was he an honourable man who did the right thing, or a Judas who betrayed the person closest to him?
Well, you want me to tell you what I think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think he did the honourable thing. I was with him at the time he was trying to make the decision. People will make their own minds up and always have done. It's a curious thing about British culture that there's nothing worse than a grass, particularly in those days, and Dad was labelled as a grass. But he'd seen Jeremy conspiring or encouraging people to conspire to murder, allegedly. And I sat with him in he by then reappeared after his disappearance, and I sat with him in his place in California, and he agonised for many days, months, about whether he should turn, what's the expression? Turn, whatever it is, on his best friend.
Yes.
And in the end, he decided that how could he not? And anyway, Jeremy tried to pin it on him. And when Jeremy tried to pin it on him, he thought, enough is enough, I'm not going to have that anymore. So it was an agonising decision, but I think he did the right thing. And today, I know you're probably about to ask another question. I think today, in those days, it was an awful thing to do. To grass on the establishment was the worst thing you could possibly do. Today, he would have been lauded for it. It's a really, things have changed slightly. So yeah, he did the right thing.
I mean, I feel like he did the right thing because, as you say, Jeremy Thorpe was... let's be honest, not a particularly pleasant man who had some questionable morals. Yes. And, your dad, for all his faults, he comes across as weirdly moral. I know he had everything that was going on, but at the heart of it, there was this moral compass.
It's interesting you've got that, actually, because yes, he did. I mean, quite seriously, he was an animal lover. For example, he would do it. If he thought he was going to run over a worm, he would get out of the car and move it. So, and of course, that was the side of my father that I loved. But he, in the end, I think I don't know, I would ask him if he was alive, but I think he regretted what he did because he didn't realise that once he got into court, any faults that he had were going to be absolutely ripped to shreds, and a judge who wasn't, shall we say, kindly.
Well, the thing is, if you've got George Conman QC prosecuting, the judge, you really don't stand a hope in hell, let's be honest with you. But I mean, for those who are under 55, let's talk about Jeremy Thorpe, because otherwise it feels like the elephant in the room, because he was a leader of the then Liberal Party, not the Liberal Democrats, but the Liberal Party, and closeted homosexual, and obviously homosexuality was illegal in those days, and the whole conspiracy to murder his lover Norman Scott was a whole thing. And obviously this is based on, it was this for you was prompted by the very British scandal. Is this kind of what prompted the whole book then?
Eventually, yes. The book's always been lurking there in the background, and when the very British scandal came out, I have to say I didn't particularly like the way it portrayed it. It kind of was a bit like a Carry-On film type of thing. I don't know if you watched it.
I know I did, yeah.
And I sort of felt, I can see why it was done like that, because it's entertaining and so on and so forth. But actually the whole thing was a tragedy, a terrible tragedy. Yes, cutting a long story short, there was another author who got in contact with me after the show and said, I've been reading about your father. You really should be writing a book about him because it's more interesting than the Thorpe affair itself. So that's what triggered the eventual writing of the book.
But I think So much has been written about Jeremy Thorpe and what went
Yeah.
on, when the dog Rinka was killed, and everybody again over the age of 55 knows about it, the story, but then the way he tried to pin it on other people. I mean, this man was. Not like your dad. He had not. There was nothing moral. Totally amoral.
I'm almost inclined to ask you a question.
Okay,
really.
go for it.
Well, do you think that, bearing in mind homosexuality was illegal, bearing in mind that the age of consent at the time he had the affair with Norman Scott was 21, and Norman was younger than that, so it was potentially rape of a minor was the charge. And and Scott was always in the background while Jeremy was having all that success. Do you think it was immorality, or do you think it was utter desperation on Thorpe's part that he was about to be found out and put in prison, and for being gay?
I mean, a good question, and it's lovely to have the tables turned for a change. Yeah. I think a bit of both. I think, desperation would have won through because, as you say, the outcome wouldn't have been great. Yeah. But I also think the way he, as a person, generally speaking, conducted himself was not, for me, felt like a very amoral man. So yes. I think, but I can see, why he would these were the actions of a desperate man. Yes. But, when the way he pinned it on your dad, who'd been nothing but kind and close, and no, not cool.
I would agree with you. That's the point at which you say, oh, actually, no, it's not only desperation, because if it was only desperation, he could always have sat down with Scott and sorted things out, couldn't he? But instead, he decided to take the route of having him murdered and thrown down a tin mine in Cornwall.
Yeah, a little bit drastic, shall we say? I mean, how did you piece together the truth from archives, which your parents obviously left behind, and kind of what shocked you the most?
I don't think I actually. It would be great to say, wouldn't it? There was a moment of shock. There are just moments of dawning, and I was shocked to find that he was leading a total of 3 lives, 2 of which were in complete secret. He had a woman in London that he lived with. He had another woman who eventually became my stepmother in New York that he lived with.
And your poor mum, who had no, your poor mum had no idea.
You really are hitting the nail on the head, really, in that also this book is about the plight of women, particularly in those days, who had to be the little woman at home, and all these things were going on in Parliament all the time. And they were the ones that really had to take the brunt of it. But yes, absolutely, my poor mother.
But I, just sorry to interject there. You say in those days, and yes, women were expected to stay at home or support. Your mum, volunteered. She didn't have a job as such. But in those days, but having been on the receiving end of being betrayed and being with someone who had a double life. I mean, I was with someone for 2.5 years, and all that time, unbeknownst to me, and I had no idea that he was leading a double life, and again a triple life as well. So we were together. We were together. He had a woman that was local. So he owned a pub, and when I used to leave, she used to come around during the day. She had 7 kids, so she was in a very different situation to me. And then he had another woman in South Africa, and this all went on for 2.5 years. And people say, how did you not know? I had no idea. When you're dealing with someone who has these narcissistic tendencies, with whom lying becomes second nature, you have no idea, and also you don't want to believe it. If I'm honest, there was not 1 second that I thought there might be a double life. I knew there was other stuff going on. He was, less, wasn't particularly on the straight and narrow, but this whole double life. And then as a woman, you just think, how could I not have known? And I really felt your mum's pain, because she really had no idea, and she devoted her whole life to being this extraordinary wife and mother. And as you say, the little woman who gave up everything for your dad.
Totally, yes. She had no job. She worked for the United Nations voluntarily while he was in New York. My mum never got over it. She never had any kind of relationship with another man after it. And one of the worst things you talk about shocks, is when I read in her archive how for the rest of her life she looked for him round every corner. which is hard to say now and is heartbreaking. I feel, but she was also huge, immensely strong. I mean, my admiration for her, knows no bounds. But I mean, this really is actually the core of the book. I mean, we talk about Thorpe and so forth, but I needed to find out if my father's disappearances for secret work for governments were real, or if they were only an excuse to get away to spend time with his 2 other women. And that was going to affect my relationship now with my father, although he's not around, deeply, and that's what I was really trying to get to the bottom of. And that's a hard thing to do. Some journalists have said, as far as they were concerned, he was an American spy. I'm not going to give things away, but I don't think he was, but there was something.
Yeah, I mean, it is a hard read, and I can't imagine what it'd be like to find out that your parent has betrayed you in that manner. I mean, that's heartbreaking, and you idolized him, and yet you looked up to him, and you had nothing but an amazing relationship. So that was sort of like the ultimate betrayal, I should think. And as you say, this book is so much more. The title "Finding Dad" is about you finding your dad even after he died, and still finding him.
Yeah, and it's an almost impossible. Look. One of the lessons from this, that I say to everybody to take from it, it doesn't matter what level of life your parents led. Before they go, sit down and talk to them about everything. Find out about everything, because after they've gone, you're going to want to ask questions, and nobody ever does, do they?
No, it's true.
It's a really, really important thing to do. I still love him. A lot of people would say, well, that's blind, but no, there was a good side to Dad, and I love the good side to Dad. He was a complicated man, is how some people put it to me, and I actually think, my sister says he always loved my mum, but I think that may be a bit of a romantic way of looking at it.
Yes, very, very possibly. But you're quite right about the fact that we never, I didn't speak to my grandparents about, their what it was like growing up, when they were younger.
Yeah.
The fact that my grandfather was actually a Lithuanian Jew who had to change his name because of anti-Semitic discrimination towards him after the Second World War.
Yeah.
So I didn't ask these questions because I didn't know about it, and you just don't.
No.
So I think you're right to sort of spend time speaking to your parents and getting to know them, or if your grandparents, if you're lucky enough to have your grandparents alive, spend that time, because you will never get that time back. And also, when you're young, you think your parents and your grandparents are really, really boring. They're not. Everyone's got a story.
Oh, sure. Oh, yes.
And in this case, I mean, more than a story. Yeah. I kind of wanted to talk to you, Paul, about your dad's secret work, because there's been a development since publication, and was he working for, and we mentioned it before, was he working for British or American intelligence, and is there now proof? Because I think this fascinating development that has emerged since the book is published, I'm curious, because it was always kind of there. So what does this change? Does this change everything we thought we knew about Peter Bessel, do you think?
It's had a bit of an effect. It sounds on the face of it like quite a small thing, but one of the things I found during my research was a memorandum written by Dad about a meeting that he had
in inverted commas,
in the State Department in Washington. And in the memorandum, because it was all secret, he'd left this to be found, I think. And he talks about this meeting, and he uses Mr. X and Mr. Y and Mr. so on and so on and so forth. And but attached to the memorandum for the eyes of his family were the real names of the people who attended. So Secretary Vance and various prominent American politicians, but he also named people who were sort of lower down in the State Department. And I always thought, if I can find those, they didn't have the internet in those days. If he knew if these people were real, then it adds substance to the fact that actually he really was doing something secret. And I went to America. I've visited the presidential libraries and so forth, researched for hours and hours and hours, couldn't find much, found a couple of names, one of which was Lowenstein. But that was just a name. But since then, really strangely, an old school friend of mine read my book. I sent it over to him. He's American. I didn't realise his father was an American diplomat. And he messaged me a few weeks ago and says, "Oh yes, I know Lowenstein. He would have been there." So all of a sudden, whereas I was thinking, well, maybe he made the names up, maybe he didn't, I don't see why he would. All of a sudden, I can put a person into that meeting that Dad said was there, and which we know was working in the right area at the time. So yes, it sounds trivial, but actually it's quite a big deal, and adds some substance to the fact that he was doing something. We will probably never know exactly what it was. I think it's something to do with the National Security Council.
I must admit, I mean, I think I definitely got that impression, and I think even though, you know, there were these fantastical elements to his life, at the heart of it was this shady, or, you know,
yes,
secret work, and as you say, it seems, even though he did have this double triple life, it feels like that those elements were true.
Yes.
It just
Oh, that's interesting.
It seems too ridiculously out there. I mean, I think he had so much, well, that's my perception, he had so much else going on. Why would you bring another layer of confusion and complication, and how would you remember? I mean, it's bad enough remembering 3 women's names. How are you going to remember all these politicians, you know? And as you say,
yeah,
why someone who was on the lower echelons of politics, you know, not, you know, you say J.D. Vance, not J.D. Vance, well, that's
Lowenstein.
Vance, you know. You know, nobody's really heard of him.
No.
But Vance, everybody has.
Yes.
So that seems a bit obscure. Why would you do that?
Well, exactly that, and of course he only spoke to his family about it. It was just part of our lives. We kind of accepted, and he would tell us things that you wouldn't otherwise know. He was very heavily involved with Vietnam, helping the Americans with Vietnam negotiations and so forth, so he said.
But again, it seems like, why would you say that? Because
well,
surely that could, I suppose you didn't have the internet, you had no way of checking, and why would you check? But yeah.
Well, I mean, he was doing it in secret. But it all makes sense. Of course they would have advisors. And Dad, as a Member of Parliament, was known to be sympathetic to the Americans, although he changed his mind years later, I would hastily add. But he was sympathetic to what the Americans were doing in Vietnam, and they needed that. And they needed advice on what the English government was thinking about at the time, because in those days Britain was still quite a powerful nation. So yeah, it kind of would all make sense. But the thing is, if all that was a lie, then it brings everything into question. It brings the Thorpe stuff into question. When he was, you know, testifying against Jeremy Thorpe, was he telling the truth? Well, I know he was, actually, because I'd been there. But nevertheless, so that whole spy thing was really, really important. Or let's say secret work. I don't think he was a spy. Not for the Americans, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think this should be made into a movie. It's fascinating. So the question I want to ask Paul is like, and I suppose that the question at the heart of finding Dad is like, why did you never sit your dad down and ask him what was going on? Because, you know, I know there's this complicated truth about fathers and sons and the things that we never say, but like, why did you never ask him, and where do you go from here?
Do you know, that's such a good question. I think at the time, as with most people, you're just carrying on with your life. I mean, since he disappeared and reappeared again, I'd built my own life in music and that sort of thing. So it kind of all went into the background a little bit. I knew he was very ill and he was going to die, early 80s. But also, this is going to sound really weird, but I didn't want to put him on the spot. I didn't want him to either have to lie to me or tell me things that parents wouldn't want to tell their children. So that put me off. Funnily enough, and ironically, a couple of days before he died, my stepmother told me that she did, at his bedside, sit next to him and say, do you want to tell me everything? And he said no.
Well, I can say there's a why break a habit of a lifetime.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So the chances are, if I had spoken to him, I wouldn't. I may not have got much, and he would have just backed off. I don't. Look, I've waffled. But the bottom line is, I don't really know why I didn't ask him, but I think those are the reasons inside.
I mean, that makes sense. Sometimes we don't want to know, because how is that going to serve us? And also, it proves that the person we love has feet of clay, which you knew he did anyway. But you don't need to know anymore, because he was going to die. So why maybe waste that precious time, asking things? As you say, he probably wasn't going to tell you the truth, because everything else had been fantastic.
But I should have done. Definitely I should have done. And this is why I think people, if they take nothing away from that book,
speak to your parents.
For God's sake, before they go, speak to them. Take a day or two. Put I was going to say a tape recorder on, but they don't exist anymore. But you know what I mean. Record what they're saying, because I was really aware, and as my mother passed, she was taking all that knowledge with her, all her feelings and everything. I should have spoken to her as well about it, but I was frightened to do that because it would upset her. These are fantastic questions. It's the best interview by far that I've had so far. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh well, I'm honoured, because I know you've been sort of a bit on the campaign media trail, and I'm very honoured, and thank you. And I that means a lot to me, and I did spend a lot of time researching it, and I read the book, and I think as an interviewer, it is my job to read, whoever my interviewee's books.
Yeah, well, you've obviously done that, and it's obviously had some effects as well, which is extremely flattering for me. So thank you very much.
And it's not meant to be flattering. I'm not here to blow smoke up your,
No.
But it is a genuinely interesting, thought-provoking, and very, very sad book as well. But I think I'm the right generation to read it as well. But I think it would be good for younger people who are younger to read it, because it is, at the heart of it, is about finding your finding dad, finding.
Do you think I found him?
I think you found elements of him.
Right.
But do we ever know anybody? And this is getting very, very deep. I think, do we ever really know, the person we love? You could be living with someone for years and not know them.
Everybody's got secrets.
Absolutely. So I don't think so. It's a whole thing. It's very deep. This is going down a whole other. But no, it's a fascinating read, and so I thank you for your kind words, and I would read this again in a couple of years' time, and I think there'll probably be an addendum to this, because I think you're going to probably maybe.
I think you could be right. Things are moving on. You mentioned film as well. There's been tickle about that.
Good.
So I don't want to. That'll put the mockers on it immediately.
No,
I'll get an email when I get
no.
home saying that's all over. So but there seems to be the sort of feeling that that's the direction it could go.
I just think the thing is, it's not just a political book, as I said. This is. I don't know if there's been anything else like this, and this is about TV or movies, whatever. We people like this sort of thing. We want to find out about people, and the subject matter, the politics aside, is very interesting, and it's almost noise, white noise.
Yeah.
This the whole parental, son versus father thing, I think will make for great television, but it is a complicated relationship. Isn't it? Yeah.
Well, the politics is the setting, isn't it? There's a personal story, and the politics is the setting, which is interesting enough in itself. Sure. I mean, they wrote they broadcast a 3-part series on the BBC a few years ago about the Thorpe thing. So it's interesting enough.
No, it absolutely is. It's been an absolute pleasure. Where can we find the book? I guess it's available at all good bookshops. Waterstones next door.
Well, Waterstones most definitely. Amazon, of course. All good bookshops, is as the phrase goes. And if you want to find out a little bit more about the book, I don't personally have a website. I am on TikTok as Brit Bloke Paul, but that's a different thing that my daughter got me into. But on the Amazon website, for example, there's a biography and explanation of the book, which is really all that's needed, isn't it? So Amazon, all good books. bookshops. Waterstones, 100%.
Honestly, Paul, it's a cracking read, and I
Thank
urge
you.
everyone to read it. It's a devoted father, husband and politician, or spy, conman, liar or murderer. You decide. Loved it. Thank you so much. On next week's show, I'll be doing more theatre, books and movie reviews. Follow me on the socials, Nancy Radio Presenter. If you'd like to come on my show, please give me at least 6 weeks notice if you've got something you want to promote. But as always, I thank you, my amazing viewers and listeners, for supporting the Nancy Stephens Lifestyle Show, and wishing you an incredible week.